first we're going to have Ms. Buck share a little bit about Steve. And so if you could go ahead and just talk a little bit about Steve and share some of his data. We have about 5 minutes to do this. So we'd asked while you're talking through Steve's performance, if you could talk a little bit about what your primary area of concern for him, any interventions that have already been attempted, and then the data that really highlights this concern that you have for him. And we'd love Miss Steve's mom to talk, Miss Brown, thank you. We'd love for you, if you have questions along the way, if you have information to share from home, we'd love to provide you some time to share that as well. So, good. So I'll turn it over to you.
Absolutely. Well, Steve is just a pleasure to have in the classroom. We really enjoy him. He's so kind to the other students. We look forward to, I haven't seen him yet today because it's the morning, but I look forward to hearing who won the NBA Finals basketball game last night from him. He puts in a lot of effort. He puts in a lot of effort in everything that he does. But as we talked about this year, reading he's just continued to be a struggle for him. We did identify right away at the beginning of the year, as you know, that he had needs. We looked at his previous history, and he has made a lot of progress this year, and I'm so happy to celebrate the progress that he's been able to make. In the classroom, I don't always see it because what he's receiving instruction in is so different from our grade level materials, and sometimes we can see some frustration in the classroom when it comes to working at grade level, but he's trying really hard. One of the things that does concern me is that we have begun to see a little bit of work avoidance, and I think it is because of the frustration, a little bit of avoiding work, and I know that recently he's received a couple office discipline referrals from Ms. Nientes for a couple of behaviors that have been demonstrated in her intervention setting, and we're pretty sure it's to try to avoid the work. But in general, I don't want you to feel like he's not doing well. He is doing well, and he is making a lot of progress. We have a couple of graphs to show you that show his progress. Ms. Nientes, though, is there something that you wanted to share as his intervention teacher, specifically point out related to his programmer progress?
So John's actually the one who's been providing the interventions. I've just been doing a little bit of the oversight, so I'm wondering, John, if there's other things you'd want to add.
Yeah, one thing that Steve tends to struggle with is his error rates. As you know, he makes several errors along the way, and sometimes it feels as though he's kind of impulsive, that he's into guessing. But some significant, we went back and we did the correction procedure with him to make sure that he was getting it right. We weren't just moving him on and making sure he got those words that were a struggle for him. And that's made some difference. In the fact that his accuracy rates, which were down in the low to mid 70s, are now up in the mid 80s, which that's a significant gain. And so his fluency hasn't come along quite as much, but as an interventionist, I'm thinking I'd rather have the accuracy come first, so he's not practicing errors faster, as we go through this. So really some nice growth there. At the same time, despite that success, he's become more hesitant to engage. And I think it's because he makes more errors than the others in the program. And the rule of the program is if there's someone making significant number of errors, you have to go back and repeat the program. So I think there might be some of this, Steve didn't make the criteria, and so we need to move on. We need to go back. And so there might be a little of that embarrassment, I'm guessing. So I'm curious if we can address that today. Maybe there's some other ways to deal with that issue, because there is something to really be celebrated.
Let's see. Anything else then from your perspective as an interventionist right now?
No, when we get down to trying to go forward, we can talk about specific skills, but no.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
And do you want to talk a little bit about the graph data?
Oh, sure. So we've been measuring his progress on a few different measures throughout the year. One is nonsense word fluency, where we are looking at is he able to use sort of that letter sound correspondence to figure out not real words, words that aren't real. And so we are seeing, I mean, his goal is set pretty high. If you're on page 6, you can see he can say those letter sounds. He's getting about 34 correct in a minute right now. He started out in September at about 28, so we are seeing progress. Not quite at the point where he's on track to meet that goal that we have established by about the middle of January, but we are seeing progress, which is good. So if you flip the page, you can see.
Sorry, but we have newsflash, we just have some data in that's a little more current.
Oh, is this old data? I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry, I see a lot of data. So if we're looking at his more current data for nonsense word fluency, whole letters read, we can see that he's making progress above our aim line, which is really good. We see that he's stagnating just a little bit where he is right now, but we have seen that he continues to be above that aim line, so we are happy with that progress. Just like Mr. Vail said, we're seeing progress. Okay? So if you flip over to page 13, you will see oral reading fluency, correct words per minute. And you'll see again that he continues to make progress. He's again below that aim line or trajectory line where we want to see him to be on track to meet that goal in January. But in general, again, continues to make pretty consistent progress. Last couple data points again have stagnated a little bit, but we are seeing some of those possible motivation issues playing into possibly the assessment. Now, what we're really celebrating is his accuracy in first grade materials. So if you flip to page 14, you'll see that he, just like Mr. Vail said, that he's reading very accurately, or his accuracy is improving quite a great deal in first grade materials. So again, keeping in mind that he's being monitored on first grade materials here, and we're in second grade, which is why we don't always see that transfer into our materials, but we are really celebrating that his accuracy has improved.
Perfect. Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for getting all that data together. I know that's a lot to put together to bring, but it really helps that conversation flow. Ms. Brown, are you seeing any particular patterns in his reading? Any we've seen, we've talked a little bit about today some kind of maybe frustration or avoidance. Are you seeing anything at home that you wanted to share with us?
I think he really wants to kind of stay, when I push him to read, what he'll choose are, these Pokemon books that are I don't know how much of them he's really reading, because he does know a lot of the characters and he can kind of, tell me what happened, but I don't know if that's what he read or what he saw on TV. And he's really not really saying much about reading at home. Even when I ask him, he just kind of shrugs it off. So I think that kind of matches what you're seeing in the classroom too.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you very much. So let's see. Are there any other important pieces of data that we should note, team, before we move on? Any difficulties in other areas that we should discuss? I wasn't seeing any patterns really. It seems like attendance has been really strong. Behavior, it doesn't seem like has been noted as a concern. There have been a couple of office visits, it looks like, maybe for maybe some avoidance or motivation issues might be related to what we're talking about, but doesn't really seem to be a pattern.
Other than, and it's not to the level of an office discipline referral, but this avoidance is showing up significantly within the intervention period.
Okay. And could you tell us real quick, Mr. Vail, before we move on to our next step, could you remind us what intervention he's receiving, how often, and for what length of time each day?
He is in phonics for reading.
Okay.
And we're at level 1.
Okay.
Okay, so that's really at your beginning letter sounds and getting into consonant vowel consonants and blending, and so we're at that level. We meet daily for 60 minutes, is it,
Mhm.
that we're meeting? So it's quite a significant
Okay,
amount
yeah.
of time
All right.
that we're in there.
And it looks like there's 5 students total in his group. Is that right? 5
Yeah,
students
yeah.
total in his group, and they're all at the same level 1. Yep. Okay.
Yeah, they
good.
all placed
Okay.
into that through the screening
Mhm.
process. Yes.
Okay. Great. Okay. Anything else for data describing, sharing?
I just know that John, I've been meeting with the interventionist, and
Yeah.
I mean, we did look a little more closely at Steve's progress monitoring data just to do a miscue analysis, and he is occasionally skipping small words like a and the, is also mispronouncing or skipping words that are magic E, consonant vowel, consonant silent E. And also words that have inflectional endings, like with our, our controlled vowels, IR,
Okay.
UR. So we've dug in to look to see if there's a pattern of errors on his
Okay.
progress monitoring probes,
Okay.
and those tend to be the issues that we're seeing.
Yeah.
What's been interesting is that when we've done what we call the goodbye list, and that's where when kids struggle with a certain sound or skill, we place it on the board and we come back to it every day. And once the students have mastered that 3 days in a row, it goes goodbye, right? And so these are things that have been consistently difficult, despite the fact that we're practicing them daily.
Okay. Good. All right. Anything else to add right now before we move on to the next step?
No, I mean, but it sounds like, John, if I'm hearing what you're saying, is that it's, that he's answering correctly after you go back and repeat the lesson. The other students don't need that level of repeating, and so.
They don't.
And
And so they've gotten it, and he's still working on it.
right.